Today we're taking a look at Cursor, a new code editor that is based on Visual Studio Code but has AI features built directly into it which can help you code much faster. In fact, in my last video I built the same app twice, first using Cursor and then just using my own knowledge and what I could find on Google, and I found that Cursor actually made me 2.5 times faster. And this is as someone who's had many years of coding experience, so it can really speed you up. So let's dive into what's different about Cursor and how you can actually use it. First of all, to download Cursor, you're going to go to cursor.com and there's a button, you can download it, install it. Again, it's pretty much like Visual Studio Code with some additional features. So if you've used VS Code, you're going to feel right at home. Now you can use it for free to some degree, and you can also bring API keys from other services like OpenAI or Anthropic, but I highly recommend the $20 a month Pro plan because you get some additional features and you get pretty much unlimited usage of some of the best models like Claude Sonnet 3.5, and you'll quickly see your return on investment with that, even if you're already using AI like ChatGPT to code, because this really is much faster. So when you first open this up, it's going to look pretty familiar if you've used VS Code before, and you're able to just write code here, you're able to set your different theme, and you can actually import some of the plugins and other things that you would have in VS Code. So they've designed it to be a pretty smooth transition. To demonstrate how Cursor works, I'm going to be iterating on the application that I built in my last video, which is called QuirkOn or QR Contact, and it's essentially a way to exchange contact information quickly through a QR code. I'm going to be adding a new feature here, which is going to allow us to have profile pictures that you can associate with your different contact cards, and we're going to use Cursor to help actually write most of the code for us. Now there's a few different ways in which AI is baked into this, and the first one I'll show is the Command or Ctrl+K, where you can highlight some code, and then if you press Ctrl+K, you're going to be able to write some instructions for the AI to iterate on that code, or to take that code into account and do something that you want it to do. So in here we can, for example, highlight this code which represents this delete button, and let's just say we want to add some more padding to it. Add more padding to this button. Okay. And it's going to go through, it's going to make some adjustments, right? So you can see here that it removed some code, it added some code. Coding effectively becomes like reviewing pull requests from the AI. So we can accept that change, and then we will see that the trash icon has moved. Now, the cool thing with Cursor is we can actually undo these changes. So if I press Ctrl+Z, it's going to go back to that edited state, and I can kind of review my code again. I can just go back to the code that I previously had and just ignore the changes that it made. So Ctrl+K can be a good way to make these targeted sort of precise little changes, but the most powerful feature that I like to use most of the time is Ctrl or Command+L. And pressing Ctrl+L is going to summon this chat window that you see on the right. And I like to think of this in many ways like ChatGPT with a lot of additional benefits. The cool thing about Cursor is it already knows your code base. When you open a project in Cursor, it's going to index all of the files that you have so that it can quickly reference them when you are making changes. But you also have control over which files you want to reference when you're asking it for changes. That's going to make it so that it doesn't just search the entire code base and get confused by having too much context. You can actually hone in on specific files that you want to change and the context that you want it to use when it's doing something that you want it to do. So let me just give an example of this, right? When I'm making this change here, by default, when you open up that chat window, it's going to reference the file that you have open, and you will see it down here. So card list. Now let's say we want to make a change to this card list where we want the QR code to appear to the left, and then we want the title and the description to be on the right of that instead of this kind of vertical thing. So we can go in here and we'll just describe what changes we actually want. Now as I think through the design here and what I actually want, I'm realizing I don't know where I want this trash icon to be, but let's actually change it for a menu icon, you know, like the little 3 dots that you can click, and then we'll have a delete item inside of that menu. So let's just go ahead and add it to this code. We can actually request multiple changes in this chat. Okay, now when we're ready, it's gonna, again, use the context of this card, and we'll go ahead and ask it for those changes. Okay, so it's written some code for us. I am using Claude Sonnet 3.5 here, which I've found to be the best model for coding as of right now. This is middle of August 24. I'm sure new models will come out, but this has been a real game changer, honestly. So now we have this code that it's written. If you generated something like this with ChatGPT, you would be spending your time replacing these existing code portions with the code that you have. So you'd still have to spend a lot of time taking the changes that it made and integrating them in your code. But with Cursor, we have this apply button, which is going to go ahead and apply all of those changes directly into our code. So this way we can review the changes that it made, and we can also just go ahead and accept them and see what this looks like. And honestly, that looks pretty good. And look at that. It's pretty much done exactly what we want. It's replaced the trash with this little menu, and we have the QR code on the left, descriptions. So this looks all good. One issue I do see is that when I click onto this menu and when I click away, the menu doesn't disappear. So we're just going to go back to Cursor and we're going to ask the AI to iterate on that. I usually try to say something like, this looks good, so that it doesn't go and try to change a bunch of code, but then I'll add the additional code that I want changed. So we're just going to keep it going in this conversation because the change that we want is related to the changes that it's made. So I'll just say, that looks great, but when I click away from the menu, when it is open, it doesn't disappear. Can you add some click away functionality to make it close? This can be a good way to build a feature pretty much just in the chat box where you have an idea in mind, you ask for the initial request, you see what the changes look like, and then you just iterate on that in that same chat until you pretty much get to a complete feature. Sometimes you'll want to start over, in which case you can just close this chat and open a new one, and then you'll have fresh context. It's like opening a new conversation in ChatGPT. Okay, so it's written some code for us. We'll go ahead and apply those changes. All right, it's using a use effect here for the click away. All right, now let's test those changes. Now if I click here, click away, perfect. All right, that's exactly what we wanted. Great, so we've made some small changes to this one file, but can we go beyond that? How do we change multiple files or add really big features? Well, this chat window is capable of a lot more than just working on one file. We can actually tag different files and ask it to change those files or just use them as references so that it knows how to change the file that you're on. So to demonstrate this, let's take a pretty big feature. We're going to want to allow users to upload images that they can use as part of their cards so that when they share this contact information, you can see the picture of the person that's actually sharing it. But that's going to involve a lot of different pieces, right? We're going to need to change the configuration page. We're going to need to validate the files, need to send it to the server. The server is going to have to upload it to some kind of file storage bucket and verify that, you know, it's an image and it's not too big. We're going to have some security features. There's a lot of different factors that are at play here, but I want to show the power of Cursor and how we can really quickly make a lot of those changes, and they're not going to be perfect, but they're going to get you like 80% of the way there. And then if you know how to code already, you're going to be able to make up that last 20% very quickly, and usually it'll be just by asking Cursor to change some things again. So let's go ahead and make a request to modify multiple files to add this pretty big feature. All right, so let's take a look at this request that I wrote up. We want to add the ability for users to add images to their contact card. To make this happen, we'll need to add a button to this page, which is the configuration page, that allows them to select an image to upload. Then, when the user saves the card, we will send that file to the server, which will save it to a storage bucket and add the URL of the image to the card before saving it in the database. Actually, I'm going to add here to specify which storage bucket I'm talking about so that it can write the code for that as well. We will be using GCP storage. Okay, we'll need to modify this file to add the upload feature. The communication should happen through the server.com.js file that I have to ensure that we attach the user token when we're making that request. And we'll also need to modify the server side of things to support this new functionality. So let's go ahead and make that request. Now it's going to write code for all of these different files. and we'll just go file by file and be able to apply it. Let's take a look at the changes that it made. So first of all, we're going to edit this configuration page. Okay, sure. I'll just apply all the changes. I'm just going to trust it for the time being, and if something goes wrong, I'll just roll forward and we'll make changes from there. So now we'll go over to server com. We'll make changes there. Okay, that looks fine. And then we're going to go to our server, and we got a bunch of changes in here as well. Okay, now we're going to use Multer as a new library. We're going to use Google Cloud Storage. That sounds good. And here's a bunch of code that it wrote to actually upload that file and then use it. We'll review all of this code to make sure it's doing this in a secure way. So it recognizes that we're going to need these two new libraries. So I can actually just copy this and run it in my server. We're going to install those two libraries. Looks good. Okay. We'll switch over here. Let's try adding a new contact. All right, now look at that. We got a button here. And as soon as I click it, it's letting me select an image. So let's go ahead and, I don't know, choose this one. Okay, well, it's rendering something for me in the UI here. Now that's not necessarily uploaded yet. We haven't tried to save it, but you can see that we already have this functioning kind of image upload where I can select the file and it's going to display here. Now, before I click save to upload this, I am actually going to review the code because I don't want it to just go to some random bucket. I want it to go to a bucket that I specify and that I have set up for this. So let's take a look at how that code works. Okay, I'm just going to press undo real quick so that I can see the changes, and this is going to highlight for me when that image upload happens. Okay, so the relevant changes are right here in handle submit. We're going to go ahead and make a request with the card ID and the image, and we're going to get the image URL out of that, and then we'll call the API to save the card. I think that's very reasonable. So again, just Control Enter, you're able to accept all of the changes, or you're able to go line by line and then make changes as you wish. Let's see what bucket it's trying to use, and then we'll make sure that it's properly set up in Google Cloud. Okay, so it looks like it's looking for the bucket that we have specified in our environmental variables. I think that's perfectly reasonable. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add this to my env file so that we can properly upload to the bucket that I want. Okay, I've got the bucket set up as far as I can tell, so let's see what happens when I try to save this with image, let's call it. Right, saving. Seems to take a little while, and then we got an error. Okay, take a look here. All right, so right now it looks like it's trying to connect to the database, but it crashes. So let's try to figure out what's going on here. Now again, I'm going to just iterate on the thing that happened before. So I'm getting this error, and I kind of have a clue as to what might be happening, but let's go ahead and ask the AI to troubleshoot it for us. All right, this seems pretty good, but I get this error. Let's see, do we need some additional changes? Okay, error suggests DB object is undefined. All right, updated version of index.js. Let's check it out. Let's see what changes it made. Okay, down here. Well, first of all, it's going to try to catch that error, and then error updating the URL. And here, looks like update image card. Okay, so this method doesn't look very clean because we actually have a database file. So let's ask it to just use that instead. I'm going to just press Ctrl+Z to remove those changes and keep the last ones. And then we're going to ask it to use our database file and update that as necessary. I see the problem. We should use db.js to handle all database interactions. Let's change the server and the db file. All right, so we'll go here, apply some changes. There we go. It added a new method for us, which is going to be to update the card. And then back to index.js, we'll go ahead and apply these changes as well. Here we go. Now it's going to actually use the database connection properly. All right, let's try to save again. There we go. It actually saved this time. And if we look at this, it logged our card. It says with image, and then it has the image URL that should be in the database. Amazing. So if we go back and then we go to the with image card, We don't yet see it. So let's keep iterating. We'll keep adjusting this so that it actually shows the image. I'm pretty confident that it saved it. It just needs to render it when we first open the card. At this point, the chat on the right is getting a little long, and I think I'm going to be better off just starting a new conversation with the AI and kind of explaining some of the context that I set, because I'm just going to want different set of files to be changed, and I don't need it to get confused by all these previous changes that it's been making. So we'll start a new chat and we'll go back to this configure contact details. So here I'm basically saying what is currently happening and what I want to happen, and I'm allowing it to sort of figure out what changes it needs to make. So I'm not over prescribing a solution because I'm not going to spend too much time thinking about it. But if it struggles with this, then I will get into more details. All right, here's the changes. I'll go ahead and apply. And it looks like pretty straightforward. Essentially, when we load the card, yeah, we're just going to use the image if it's already there. And that's great. All right, we'll accept the change. Now, when we go in here, we see Clippy. Perfect. All right. And it was that smooth. In what, 10, 15 minutes, we added the ability to upload images, retrieve them as needed. And, you know, that probably would have taken a lot more time without the help of AI. So now let's just clean this up a little bit, and we'll show this near the top instead of kind of in the middle here. All right, now it's going to move some things around for us. We'll apply these changes. All right, there we go. That's looking a little bit better. We can change profile picture. Let's use something else. All right. Save. Okay, it's saved. Let's see if it comes up again. Yep, we got our new picture. And if we look over here, this is our storage bucket. We can see those images that got uploaded. So this sidebar is really how I do a lot of the coding, and it's really the workhorse for me. But there are some other features which I find really beneficial as well. So now that we've made all of these changes, this file is getting a little bit too large, and I want to refactor it into something more manageable. And because I'm going to be creating new files, I'm going to show you one more feature that Cursor has, which is one of the more powerful newer features, and that's called the Composer. Now, the Composer is really designed for doing all of these multi-file interactions, and sometimes it gets overwhelming and confusing because you can't as clearly see the changes and revert them. But in this sort of situation, it can be a really quick way to create all of these new files and keep things organized. To activate the Composer, you might have to go to File, Preferences, Cursor Settings, and then in the Beta section, it is this Multi-Composer. So we'll go ahead and open it using Ctrl+Shift+I, and let's ask it to refactor some things for us. The cool thing about the Composer is that it works on all of these files separately, but in parallel. So it's actually faster than going one by one and changing these files. And it's actually creating new files for me, which is going to be really useful. Okay, so it's taking out a bunch of these sections, making them into new files, and we can kind of compare the differences. Let's be bold and just accept all and see how it goes. All right, we'll close that. So now we have all these additional files. So contact detail item, contact detail form. Let's go ahead and switch over. And it looks like it left out a lot of these different dependencies. So, you know, the Composer is still a work in progress. Let's open it back up and give it some feedback. Okay, looks like it's applying some changes to those files. Well, I'll be honest, this didn't work as well as I expected, and I feel like it's going to be pretty difficult for me to fix that form and know what context it's working with. So while the Composer is a powerful way, and I expect this is going to be the best way to work with Cursor in the future, I think right now it's at a point where it's a little difficult to tell what it's going to change and how it's going to change it. Like, the scope is too large that when it makes errors like this, it's really difficult to roll things back. So, you know, the Composer is still in beta. We're going to go ahead and undo those changes. So I went ahead and just Ctrl+Z, I undid those changes. Now we got some new files. I'm going to delete those. I think it's just that the scope of the changes it tries to make can be so large that some wires get crossed and some of the models just don't keep up with it just yet. And that's why it's in beta. I mean, they're still developing this feature. So I'm going to go ahead and ask it to refactor things for me in the sidebar, and we'll keep it to something a little more manageable. Let's just move the image upload stuff into a separate file, and then we'll reference it here. Let's call the file profile picture instead. All right, and then here's how we... Okay, great. So now when we go here, it still works as expected. Save the changes. Okay, that all looks good. When I open it, it loads the correct file. So that refactor was a little bit smoother. And this is the cool thing, is that, you know, when you're doing a refactor manually, you're going to have to go in and change all these different values, but AI can really accelerate that. So you can actually, like, you start off with messy code because you have AI write all this, but you can also get AI to refactor it. So you can make things cleaner and much more organized. So at this point, we've added the ability to upload these pictures, and we can see it during this configuration page. But when we go to the preview, the picture is not there, and this could use a little bit more polishing. So I want to show you another cursor feature which I really like, and that's the ability to use images. You can actually take screenshots of a design, for example, and have Cursor build out what it sees in the image. So I have here an outline of what I want this card to look like, and this is kind of a rough draft. And keep in mind that Cursor is not going to be perfect about this, but it can be a really great way to get started. So if you're working on a project and a designer sends you, a Figma file, you can take a screenshot and then just generate code out of that. I know Figma has some code exporting features, but they just never seem to work for me, so I found this to be a more effective approach. Anyhow, the way that I like to do this is to just take a screenshot of the design, and then we'll flip over back into Cursor. I'm on the contact preview card here, and I'm gonna go ahead and just give it this design and say, I'll just give it a hint of where that data is located. So let's give this a try. All right, we got a bunch of changes. We'll flip back over to the browser, and let's see what the preview looks like. Well, it looks mostly correct, except that it's full width, so we just need to control the width. Let's say, I don't know, 400 pixels. Okay, and then we kind of want to center it, so let's see if we can MX Auto. Look at that. This is another powerful feature of Cursor that it auto suggests, and now it's saying, okay, so there we go. That's looking a lot closer to what I wanted. Maybe we can also give it a max height. Let's add a little border. Nice. And by the way, I don't know if you noticed that, but Cursor just auto-completed a lot of that for me. So I just typed in B, and automatically it is suggesting border, border gray, rounded large, shadow large. So I can auto-complete that, and the way that it knows that is because it's very familiar with Tailwind, it's familiar with React, it's familiar with a lot of frameworks. So there we go. This card is looking a lot nicer and closer to what I wanted. With one more prompt, we got the blue going halfway down, and we got that nice white border around the image, and this looks a lot more professional. You can see again here when I type in send, because I don't remember the Tailwind class, I want the text to be centered, and I type in send, and it auto recommends I do text center. So we'll do that. And boom, my name is now centered. I didn't have to go look up what that class name was actually called. So perfect. Another Cursor feature that I want to highlight is the Autocomplete plus Auto-Tab, where Cursor can actually predict where you're going to want to go next. And this can be a really great way to edit code manually without that sidebar. So looking at this function here, I have an if statement with a bunch of else ifs. Just as an example, let's try to switch this to a switch case statement instead. So let's say I change this and I type switch. Well, it immediately knows the rest of what I want to type on this line. Then it predicts how I'm going to want to change some of the following lines. And I can just press tab, and then it even knows which next line I want to go to after that. So I'll go over here, and it predicts to switch it to email. I can basically just keep pressing tab, and there we go. And let's just format that real quick. Okay, and now I've switched all of those if-else statements to cases. I don't know if this is actually any more readable. I think if I refactor this into some smaller functions, then it might look better. So let's go back to that Ctrl+K. We'll just select that section of the code and say, refactor this. All right, it gave us all those changes. Now we have this format value and some very specific formatting functions. So a pretty quick, easy way to refactor and makes it a lot more readable. Oh, and I almost forgot one other feature which is pretty useful at times, especially if you're working in a really large code base. Because Cursor indexes all of the files, you can actually search your code base more intelligently. So in the sidebar here, I could ask it, where in my code base does the get set? And then I can press Ctrl+Enter to search the entire code base. And now it's going to go look through all these different files, and it'll be able to provide me with an answer. So in this case, it's set in the index HTML file. There it goes. It points me to the right place. So if you're just lost in a large code base, this can be a really great way to find your way around and to try to understand how some files relate to each other. Once you do have a better understanding of the code base, I would recommend that you just tag specific files instead of searching across the whole code base. But if you're totally lost and you're not sure where something is, it can be an effective way to find that. So hopefully this helps you see how you can code much faster using Cursor. And if you have any questions, drop them down in the comments, because I'd love to make more videos like this showing you how you can use AI to improve your coding speed. As always, thanks for watching. Take care.